Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Robert Prevost, a member of the North American Dogman Project science team. This is always absolutely epic to see you make your way into the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy. Absolutely delicious, and I do appreciate you releasing me from my shackles. Now, without further ado, it is time for Mr. Prevost and myself to take a walk into the darkness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night. Yes, it is almost the new year. And maybe by the time you hear this, it might just be the new year. But tonight, once again, on StarFox Radio in Midnight Lycanthropy, we venture into the darkness in an attempt to figure out what is happening with missing people and strange canine sightings tonight around the late night fire. Ooh, we have Robert Prevost from the North American Dogman Project science team. And if you do listen to our content, you will be well aware of him because he is a bi-weekly host. And we are going to sit down and burn the midnight timber. Robert, what about you, man? How you doing, bro?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm glad to hear that you're doing great, Kenny.
Appreciate it. And I hope everything's been pretty calm your ways. I know, obviously, editing on Robert's behalf is pretty much the same thing that I'm always consistently doing. Everyone is definitely staying pretty busy, but all I do, man, is edit, link up with people, repeat, and hey, it's a good thing, man. Sometimes it feels like the Twilight Zone, but in a good way, I guess.
That is true. That is true. I'm constantly doing that. I just had a interview with the boss just the other day with Mr. Jody Cook, so that was fantastic. We finally got to sit down and talk. So got that podcast episode getting ready to come out, and like you said, constantly busy doing the next podcast and then editing the next day.
It's beautiful stuff. That's all you can do. Well, tonight I figured we should just try to put together a little bit more knowledge on to potentially what's occurring here. And Robert, I know you've been diving into some pretty gnarly research involving the Dogman. Anything interesting your way?
Well, as usual, I try to keep everything pretty scientific, pretty biological, but I have been venturing out into the folklore and a little bit into the woo a little bit more. So, if we look at it in the folklore sense of things, moving beyond just the werewolf to shape shifting, we start to get into a little bit of the whole goblin lore and kind of the fae lore. So it's getting pretty interesting. So just kind of playing around with some ideas, whole lot of speculation, not really nailing anything down.
Understandable. Well, I mean, that's how science is. You got to work and plug away. Well, I don't like to be around chaos, but sometimes life is chaotic. But as long as you can control the chaos in just one nice fluid direction and just make it all work, it's okay sometimes, because that's what opportunity seems to be. You never really know. You know, you might plan on not having anyone to link up with for the day. And then all of a sudden, a couple of your hosts or friends reach out and they're like, hey, you want to sit down later? Do you have some time? You're like, yeah, actually, I do. Next thing you know, you had planned on just working on images and editing all night. And well, you have 3.5 hours worth of time of chatting with people, which is something that's needed though, because you don't have content without sitting down with people. But that's just what I mean about kind of controlling the chaos. In a perfect world, I'd like to do one a day, but like I said, you can't really complain about opportunities. So
Yep, that's true. Oh, I wanted to throw one thing in there. I actually got in contact with a eyewitness today that was pretty interesting. If you watch my channel at all, there's a eyewitness that I did an interview with, and it's in Horseshoe Bend, Arkansas. And he just contacted me today, and in that area, they have located a cave. And we are going to get together a group, and we are going to try to make our way over to that cave that's on the side of a cliff close to this river, and it's supposed to be where a possible Dogman encounter happened, not once but twice that we know of.
dang, well, that is some pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure. And I actually had a chance last night to sit down with Jake Travis from the Hog Art Project out on the West Coast. And he was telling me some pretty interesting stuff as well. So sounds like there's some good information rolling in for sure. Very interesting. I do know large cats in general despise leaving tracks. It's usually predators that don't really care so much, like because they just know they're dominant, like a large pack of hyenas or a grizzly bear that don't really seem to care. But solitary predators, especially felines, try to cover up their tracks for sure. And I am up here in the good old Maine. But have you heard of Cold Hollow, Vermont? I have talked about this before, and it's a pretty interesting area, but I don't know if much more can be squeezed out of the Rhine unless one of us or somebody we collaborate with can get down there, because it's been pretty much all gathered as much as possible. But have you heard about that area?
I haven't. You piqued my interest. I'd really like to hear what's going on.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting place. And Robert, it's located too in an area called the Cold Hollow Mountains, which obviously, and it runs pretty much into Canada, more or less, and it's an extremely dense area. Because I mean, New England in general is a ton of forest. Up here in Maine, we are the most forested state in the whole entire country. We have a ton of wilderness, and New England in general has a lot of that as well. So you hit this area, it's pretty isolated. I mean, the Cold Hollow Mountain Range itself, its high point is 3,327 feet, and it's located near Belvedere. And it's technically private land, but there is a small community that is set up in there. And the people I got a chance to speak to pretty much said if you want any sort of entertainment that someone younger would enjoy, because I mean they still have younger people there, like nightlife, like dance clubs or bars, whatever. They said they have to drive at least an hour and a half, an hour, give or take, maybe a little bit more to get to an area, because there they have like their local pizza shop, which is like a restaurant, but I don't think they have any bars that she had said, and it's just pretty much a small community. Well, again, you have these strange sightings that people have been seeing in the mountainous area around there for not even modern day times, back in more, times based in like the 1800s, but also people's pets are going missing, and people themselves supposedly have walked off into the forest and never came back, which doesn't have to be cryptid based, but before, I kind of dive into it more, that's just like the back lore of it.
That's really interesting.
So, have you heard about that location itself, like outside in that mountain range that connects to Canada down through New England?
No, I'll have to say I'm a little bit vague on that one. I'll have to do a little bit of digging into that. I mean, I I'm one of those, I mess with a lot of stuff that has to do with the Ozarks, the Appalachians, and, of course, things that go on in the Rockies, going up into the Canadian Rockies, and, I talk with Ryan a whole lot, Ryan Tremblay, and we talk about the Nahanni Valley up in Canada and, different areas like that. But that one's escaped me.
It's in line with pretty much all those places like you had spoken of. And do you remember when I mentioned that Bennington Triangle to you as well? So, in the Bennington Triangle, have you yourself heard of that, my friend?
Yes, I have heard of the Bennington Triangle.
Okay, so inside of there, you have all these people that were missing and strange sightings of large, hairy men, dog type like beings. That's actually remotely near Cold Hollow ish as well, in that type of dense forested area. So it's just pretty interesting because same thing with the Bridgewater Triangle, which is an area where there is another really large patch of forest and stuff. And again, all here in New England. Is it ironic? I don't really believe in that type of symbolism. So there is something at least occurring. How do you feel?
I think that's probably pretty accurate. When we look at a lot of these areas of high strangeness where we have Bigfoot activity, we have a lot of paranormal activity, and definitely with the Dogman, we've got the Bennington Triangle, we've got the Bridgewater Triangle, we've got the Alaskan Triangle, we've even got the one down in Texas, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's 5 or 10 more throughout the United States. It's just a matter of researchers getting out there and looking and really getting the information in. And that's one of the big things that the North American Dogman Project is really doing, is collecting information. We're primarily bringing in the data, like Jody and I were talking about the other night. It's mostly about collecting data. We're trying to get in all the information that we can without really passing a whole lot of judgment one way or the other. So yeah, there's a lot of strange things that happen out in certain areas, and it's about collecting data and trying to figure out what is the geographical stuff that's going on out there. Are we looking at mountain ranges? Are we looking at swamps? Are we looking at differences in is there a lot of quartz out there? Is there a lot of iron in the ground? What is about these areas? Is it just because there's a high amount of timber growth, or is there a lack of people? What is it that makes this area so special? But there's a lot of areas like that throughout the United States. So yeah, there's definitely something going on there.
Brilliant stuff right there. And I couldn't agree more. And it's definitely good that Jody is rolling back around for sure. And yes, the Wendigo guy, Tremblay, always brilliant information too. So I'm actually
Yeah, he is.
getting Jody on here sometime next week again. And Ryan actually pops on bi-weekly, which is excellent. But like you were saying, yeah, no, it's pretty interesting for sure. That is all kind of occurring in those clumped up areas.
Mm-hmm.
And like you had said, the Aaron D. Dogman Triangle, he's one of my buddies too. And I actually did a spin off of that because I love the terminology. And I actually thought it sounded cooler than Dogman Square. But there's an area that I've dubbed Werewolf Square that includes Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, the LBL, so Tennessee, Kentucky, parts of Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania, and it's all like right up in there. So it's a distinguishable play on words because both Aaron and I agree that those words get used way too much.
Yeah.
Interchanged wise, but everyone else does it, which doesn't make it right saying that I do it now too. Like, hey, look, they do it too. But yeah, it's just a funny take on that. When you got a chance to sit down with Jody the other night, that's some pretty cool stuff. What did you and him chat about? I mean, he usually keeps me all updated as to what he's been doing, and I know that we're trying to really work on the Germantown, Ohio documentary that's going to be being put out here pretty soon. And yeah, but I mean, did you guys get to dive into some pretty cool stuff?
We did mention the Germantown stuff just a little bit. We kind of scanned over that. It was more of an introductory episode. Not that Jody needs an introduction or whatever, but it was kind of okay. Well, for my listeners and for my benefit, just tell me who Jody is and how he got started in it and what eventually got him to start the North American Dogman project, how it's done, kind of what uh what his vision for the North American Dogman project is, and that kind of stuff, and talking about evidence, and as far as what his thoughts are on the cryptid, the entity, whatever you want to call it, and we kind of delved into the biologics of it, and talked a little bit about the paranormal stuff that kind of goes with it, because even Bigfoot seems to have a little bit of paranormal stuff that floats around with it. So with Dogman, there's the same thing, um, and I'm one of those too that is kind of okay. A lot of what people call paranormal is normal. It's just we don't understand the scientific basis behind what it is. It's kind of like that old saying that, um, you know, extreme science to a primitive culture is going to appear as magic. So you have to think if this is something that we completely don't understand because either we don't have a basis on which to look at it or observe it, or we don't understand it through the senses that we have currently, it's going to appear as something supernatural. So, but we had a whole lot of fun. Jody and I have a lot in common. So, yeah, I got a real kick out of talking with him.
Brilliant stuff right there. And yeah, man, I grew up watching him and Linda. Unfortunately, rest in peace, Linda. I would have loved to sit down and chat with her. She was a legend, but I mean, just by doing what we're all doing, we can still make sure to keep her legacy alive. And yeah, I mean, if anyone ever wants to learn about Dogman and such, those are the two people that everyone should really be paying attention to. I mean, it's great to speak to other people, but you got to start with the goats, all right? And there they both sit right there for sure. And Linda had some pretty interesting stuff, and I'm actually hopefully going to be able to speak to a witness. I got a chance to speak to her too a while ago, which is pretty excellent.
I agree with you 110% about what you're saying about Jody and about Linda. That's one thing that I kind of have it's a hard and fast rule for me. If you're going to take an interest in something, be respectful to the people who were there before you, who started it. Linda, of course, was there on the ground floor. Nobody talked about Dogman or werewolves or anything in any serious nature until Linda got in there and started covering that. And then Jody, of course, was right there, right behind her. And, so these are the people who have been doing it the longest as far as on that subject, and you really need to pay attention and give them the respect that they earned, because they did earn it. They've been there the longest, and they've been toting the line for a while.
Very well stated right there for sure. And I mean, like I also stated, there's definitely quality information out there that didn't originate or become organic from both of them. But I mean, it's something that if anyone wants to learn about a topic, I mean, somebody the other day came to me and was like, "Oh, you know so much about all this," and I was like, "Oh, cool, thank you so much. You ever heard of Linda Godfrey and read any of her stuff?" No idea. And I was like, "Dude, that is so bogus that you just came to me and asked me about something before even knowing who, like you said, really started bringing information to that."
Right.
Because it's just a respect thing that people I respect, I got to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
they get the kudos that they deserved. And same thing, like growing up, man. I mean, I saw Jody through Monster Quest. That's how I saw Jody. And then after that, I started sneaking down to the library, hopping up on the internet and trying to figure out exactly like what was going on. And now I get to talk to him, and I've chilled with him before. So super cool stuff. But like you said, I mean, it's like somebody, all right, an example here. I don't work on cars or anything like that. I work with visual effects and obviously podcasts, etc. That's like me going and asking somebody to help me out with a car, right? But
Hmm.
then telling them they don't know what they're doing about it and they're doing it wrong. And it's like, wait a second, why would you A have gone there in the first place if you knew how to do it? It doesn't work like that. Like if you want to learn how to cook, you should probably go watch somebody like Gordon Ramsay or something, correct? I mean, you want to learn from people that actually do that. You don't go into Gordon Ramsay's kitchen as a mechanic and tell him he doesn't know how to cook, right?
Exactly. And what kind of gets me, especially in the Dogman thing, I'm not going to throw any names out there because I'm not throwing anybody under the bus and I'm not making less of anybody, but there seems to have been a few YouTube channels, a few podcasts and podcasters, and a few eyewitnesses who honestly are more of the Johnny come lately who have popped onto the scene and kind of been the next big thing and kind of really collected on the topic of Dogman and in a lot of ways done some disservice to the subject rather than helping it. They've kind of ridden on Jody's coattails, Linda's coattails, and other people without giving them due credit where the credit should have been given. And these people, they're the big names or whatever that are floating around the internet right now. Anytime you see anything about Dogman, and honestly, it kind of perturbs me because they really haven't earned that. And the people who really did earn it are kind of just being ignored. And I don't really understand that, why they're being ignored and the information and the data that they have worked their entire lives together is being ignored.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. I mean, it's just something that you have to give kudos to kudos. That's like somebody that enjoys kung fu and follows kung fu, not giving kudos to like Bruce Lee or something. I mean,
Exactly.
it just
Exactly.
doesn't seem to make sense. Or same thing. I mean, whether people, I personally love Ronda Rousey. I've met her a few times, but that's like any sort of female fighter not acknowledging Ronda Rousey. I mean, there was no female division in the UFC until because she was so dope they had to make one for her, and pretty
Hmm.
much. And then now because of that, all these other women have great opportunities. But if anyone wants to fact check me, literally go check it out. You can hear Dana White say it, that he was never going to put women in UFC. But because Ronda Rousey literally was so dope, she was kicking the crap out of dudes down in Brazil. She couldn't train with the women because she was hurting them. She legit was beating guys that had black belts, and she got a bronze in jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. I mean, this chick is straight up badass. Again, so to anyone out there that takes interest in that, they would you should be giving her kudos because that wouldn't exist without her. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we're on the same page on that. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's why I do always try to make sure and let people know and just put up like thumbnails and such that show who individuals are and things throughout my videos just to always kind of 100%. It's just super important to make sure to learn as much as possible from people you can. And what is the case that you feel like you can close up the soonest or that you would like to just kind of rid yourself of?
Cases that I'd like to rid myself of. Honestly, there's a couple of popular cases that I think there is a lack of real evidence in that I think we need to put to bed. One of them has been super popular within the Dogman community for a long time, and I don't think there's enough to really warrant it. One is the massacre at the LBL. I don't think there's enough real information behind it. I think it's been one of those that has ridden on the edge of being a creepy pasta. Um, if I'm wrong and there's actual evidence out there, I'll be the first one to eat my words, and I'd be fine with that. Um, I that's I just think we're kind of spinning our wheels with that. I think a lot of people are just making a lot of money off of something that didn't ever really happen. It started as a Reddit thread by a lady who was really into writing amateur stories. Um, and unfortunately, she's passed away, and she's not here to say one way or the other. So she can't really defend herself or clarify anything on that. So I don't mean anything ill towards her in any one way or the other. That's one that I think we need to put to bed. I personally have that investigation that I was talking about that is going on in Horseshoe Bend, Arkansas. That's an interesting one. It's a lot of hit and miss that's going on with a couple of eyewitnesses in particular. So I need to try to isolate a little bit more time to be a little bit more hands on there. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hour drive from here where I have to go to do the investigation. So I do need to be a little bit more boots on the ground with that one. I've got a gentleman who is the one of the eyewitnesses who is helping me out a great deal with that. We would like to go in and locate some tracks. And there was actually a hair sample that was taken from the area. I have part of it here. Um, I would like to go in and get more biological samples and find out more about the area. So, it's there's always going to be new cases that are popping open. There's always going to be old cases that need to be shut down. And sometimes old cases don't shut down. They just go dormant for a while and then they come back around. That's like the Sasquatch investigation that we're doing up in Missouri. It goes dormant for a period of time and then they pop back up for a little bit and then it goes dormant again. So that's another one that I have. Actually, we're not even sure that that's a Sasquatch. That may actually be a Dogman too. We're not sure. So yeah, it's kind of hit or miss. It's like you're busy all the time, and then all of a sudden nothing happens.
Yep, and then that's how it rolls. And before I respond to some of that, JJ just told me that he apologizes to everybody. He is having technical difficulties. And Robert, he said he wishes he could be back here because he enjoyed the conversation and would like to link up again. But yes, I will have to get him back on in like a week or so to everybody. So I do apologize right there for sure.
Well, technical difficulties happen. Lord knows I had all kinds of problems trying to log on just a few minutes ago. So luckily I was able to do that. But I would definitely like to link up with JJ, help him out, and I know he'd be willing to help me out. So, we'll have more conversations in the future.
Yes, exactly, for sure. And when you were talking about the LBL instance, I have some definitely opinions on that whole thing as well, for sure. And have you ever had a chance to speak to or hear anything about Jan Thompson? The only things I've ever heard, I wish I could have spoke to her, is the encounter that her and her cousin and I believe her cousin's brother, where he was almost ripped off his motorbike by something through the forest near the LBL area when they were younger, and he had a huge 5 claw like scratch on his leg. And then they said this thing had followed them back or him back because he literally jumped off his dirt bike like crazy. They ran in the house. We're supposed to be helping Jan's aunt out to bring in groceries, but they were so terrified of this thing they barricaded all the windows and hid underneath the bed with knives. And I guess they heard some banging, eventually quiet, and then her aunt did show up and was super pissed off at first because couldn't get into her house. It's all barricaded. And then the only other time I've heard her speak about anything was about how the whole LBL thing and about how she had spoken consistently to those two deputies that had, per se claimed it all unfolded. And yeah, how do you feel about all that?
It's interesting. Jan Thompson, yeah, I've heard all of her stories, and yeah, actually, the one with her aunt went on a little bit further. I think it was her uncle, I want to say, who eventually went off. first of all, he ended up telling the kids, don't go in the woods anymore. And then later on, there was an area, I think it was a gravel pit area or something familiar to that, where they found him and a friend, I believe it was, took a look out that way in the area, and found piles of bones, several different types of bones, animal bones, and I think there was even a possibility of maybe some human bones, but they found that very disturbing. And yeah, it's interesting. Here's my thing. Stories are fantastic. I love stories. I love, we're podcasters. We thrive on eyewitness testimony, and it's fantastic. We all love it. The scientific side of me, the cryptozoologist side of me, the biologist side of me is the one who is going, okay, so where's the evidence? I need photographs, I need audio, I need more than one eyewitness testimony, I need physical evidence, I need hair samples, I need tracks, I need things like that. I'm not saying that the person isn't telling the truth. I'm saying there isn't substantiating evidence to back up the story. That's just like, if I go swimming in the ocean and I come back and I tell everybody, wow, I had a great time swimming in the ocean with 3 great white sharks that just swam with me, and I pet them the whole time I was out there. They were never mean to me, nothing ever happened. I felt so at peace and so at home, and I go back and I tell everybody and they look at me like I'm nuts. Maybe it really happened, but maybe it didn't. For me, it was a real experience, maybe. But how do I prove that? How do I prove that to somebody else? Because you don't want somebody else going out and swimming in the ocean thinking that they're going to go out there and pet great white sharks.
That's a very valid point, too. And yeah, you were referring to the Sawmill area near where all had happened. And yeah, there was a bunch of burrows, more or less, seemingly, that had a ton of bones and just ripped apart animals all around there. So that's pretty interesting because, yeah, her uncle was just like, stay out of the woods, and was not very happy that, his son had been out there in the first place. So, yeah, pretty gnarly stuff. But like you had said, man, Jody makes such a great point, though, too, about how this would have occurred in an area where there would be so many different people coming in to help, because it was such a small area that they wouldn't be able to handle all of this by themselves. So the odds of ever really getting a chance to, quote unquote, speak to anybody that would have been there, it's coming around the age they're all going to be, unfortunately, deceased at this point in time. But it's like where I am, okay? So I live in the greater Portland area, and in this area, say if something happened in Westbrook, right, you could have people coming from Gorham, Saco, Scarborough, Portland, all these nearby areas in the greater Portland area to come help, meaning you might have extra ambulances, more, firefighters that can come, more people that are volunteers, etc. So same thing down there. It wouldn't just be one unit of sheriff deputies just handling this whole entire thing. So I'm pretty sure Jody had spoken about this before. I haven't had a chance to directly talk to him, but about this, I'm pretty sure when I watched one of the documentaries they did about the LBL, he had said he had gotten a chance to speak to those deputies more or less on their unaliving beds, and that was pretty much like their confessions. And I guess there was photos floating around that they didn't want to give us possession of, but Jody recreated some of those, and you've probably seen those before, where him and I don't know who the other member is, are more or less acting like the forensic unit and picking up stuff. Well, they remade the images and they're creepy as heck. So do you, like you said, those deputies, I believe they obviously saw something and saw, well, maybe a person unalived or such. But again, they themselves never said they saw a Dogman, did they? I know Glenn from Kentucky didn't use the term Dogman. He said it looked like a giant hyena, which is what you and I and everyone else is speaking about, with the hyenas kicking around. But he actually says hyena. Literally, those words come out of his mouth. But with these deputies and stuff, did they ever say they saw anything besides the unalived family? I mean, could that not have been done by a psychotic person too? I mean, I don't know.
It could have, and there's there's an argument that can go both ways. So I mean that's the problem with some of these things is that it sets in limbo, and it's like you can't pull it out of limbo because you have this event that happened in the past. Where are the records on it? And when I say that, you're automatically going to have people who are going to say, well, they covered it up. Okay, they covered it up. They hid all the records. They hid all the papers. They burned all the evidence. Blah 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 blah. Okay, that's fine. And I don't mean that in a mean way when I say blah 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 blah. I mean it's just that's part of the course for the argument. However, whenever you have a family that families have relatives usually, so there should be relatives out there somewhere who are going to who would be at some point willing to come forward and say, you know what, that was my aunt, that was my uncle, that was my cousin, that was somebody, and actually come on camera and say, okay, this is who this was. This is the father, this is the mother, this is the son, this is the daughter, this is, it's funny because it's a very nuclear family. It's a mother, a father, a son, a daughter. They were in an area at the time of year where nobody was really there. They were in a mobile home in the middle of nowhere. It is just kind of almost the perfect story. Now, I'm not saying it
Mhm.
didn't happen, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of interesting details with this. And whenever Jan Thompson wrote the story, she wrote a whole lot of really interesting descriptive terms to almost like when Stephen King tries to write it, or Stephen King writes a
Mhm.
book where he's trying to, and it looked like this in an odd description. So that's what made a lot of people go, I think he was
Mhm.
writing a story.
Hmm.
So, you know, we have to come at it. Any evidence, you have to come at it without a bias, and you have to be a little bit skeptical. There's nothing wrong with being skeptical because skeptics ask questions and they ask the right questions. If you walk into a situation and you automatically buy what's going on at the story, there's nothing to prove. And we need to be able to start proving things. We're continuing the same baloney, honestly, that cryptozoologists have been doing for the past 100 years, and we need to do better because I think the public deserves it. That's one thing that the North American Dogman Project is trying to do is to get the information out to the public. And in order to do that, we have to do a better job than those before us. We have to gather that information. We have to ask the hard questions. We have to do what, you know, these other groups refuse to do.
No, excellent stuff right there. And before we let you get back to the busy schedule that you do have to attend to, it is super interesting, man, because I would love to speak to her cousins or anybody else. I have never heard any of them speak besides her, which
Hmm.
is interesting for sure. And again, those deputies, I don't know. I didn't get a chance to speak to them. I mean, or if they even spoke to anybody else outside of Jody and some of the NADP. Same thing. I didn't get a chance to speak to Glenn, but I heard everything inside and out because Jody has that actual whole entire interview he did with him because that's more or less his unalived confession because he had really bad cancer and
Hmm.
well yeah, and he just felt like he wanted to get it out there. But man, so interesting for sure. And do you have anything else?
Definitely.
Yeah, do you have?
I think it's all definitely very interesting, and I want to clarify one thing. I know a lot of times I come across as almost a doubting Thomas and saying, almost like I absolutely don't believe that I'm super skeptical that and I don't want to come across that I'm calling anybody a liar. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. But what I want to do is collect the information so that I can set it in front of any skeptic in the world and say, okay, disprove this because here's all the evidence. This is enough evidence, just like we know that gorillas exist because here's gorillas. I want to be able to set this in front of people and say, okay, well, this is how we know Dogman exists. It's kind of the same thing as trying to prove it in a court of law. So I just don't want anybody to get me wrong as far as, I'm sure I know I come across to a lot of people as, well, you just don't believe. Well, no, it's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of faith. That's what religion is. This is science. Cryptozoology is a science. So we have to come up with the evidence. We have to ask the hard questions, and we have to ask the hard questions of each other. If I come up and I say, I saw this thing, uh, creature X, and it did this and it did that. Well, people are immediately going to ask me, well, what evidence do you have? Or they should be asking me that. Um, you know, and that's our duty. We as scientists, as the podcasters, and as NADP and the other groups out there, that's our responsibility. We have to come up with the evidence. We have to come up with the proof because honestly, nobody has to believe us. We're the ones who are trying to prove something.
Boom. Isn't that the truth? And I couldn't have stated that better, my friend. Well, thank you again for hanging out with us tonight. And to the audience, yes, I will have all the links up to everyone's page where you can go check them out. And I do encourage you to pop over to their threads, even though JJ is lost in the void. But Robert has a great podcast and you should check out. He covers a bunch of great things. And like I said, his link will be up. And thanks again for hanging out with us tonight, man. I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks.
Anytime, Kenny, and I'm here for you. I'll be here every 2 weeks to hang out with you. So, and pretty soon I'm about to have you on the show. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a good 2025 coming up. I think we're all gonna have a whole lot of fun with this subject.
Ooh, you legends, you, I do adore every single one of you. If you like my content, please subscribe, comment, share it, and feed the algorithm.